tariffs, you still think we get to new highs in 2025?
As you know, Bitcoin's above its April 2nd level. So Bitcoin, I think, is telling us the S&P should recover. I think new highs are possible this year. I mean, one reason is, companies have proven themselves to manage through shocks, and I don't think investors give them enough credit. That happened with COVID. Companies survived. Companies survived a bullwhip effect on the economy. They survived a surge in inflation. They survived the Fed hiking at the fastest rate ever. So I think this tariff shock, while it is shocking, I think earnings will probably outperform expectations, even if we don't know the effects of the tariff.
Tom Lee is optimistic despite tariff worries, believing companies will handle shocks and earnings could beat expectations, helping markets and Bitcoin reach new highs in 2025. He sees Bitcoin as a key hedge when traditional markets struggle. Institutional interest in Bitcoin, especially via ETFs, is growing fast, bringing major investments and boosting its role in finance. Big companies are now able to invest more easily in Bitcoin, marking a turning point. Lee predicts explosive Bitcoin growth as blockchain and AI combine, creating long-term opportunities. He encourages investors to watch closely as these trends unfold in 2025.
The peak tariff angst was hit when you said it was hit, and couldn't it come back still, though?
Joe, I do think tariff fears can come back, but the stock market and I think the macro is in a better place today than it was on April 7th. One is I think that the tariff expectations, even if we don't know what they end up looking like, are really much better than what we saw on April 2nd. The second is that the markets that lead stocks, such as credit and the VIX and high yield, are in a much better place. High yield has recovered almost all the widening that happened since April 7th, and the VIX is uninverting the term structure, which basically means the market for volatility is calming down. And then I think when we look at 2026, I think there is stuff to have some confidence about because the economy is holding up better at the moment, and next year we can look forward to deregulation. I think the comparisons for earnings will be much better for next year. And then, of course, if we get some tariff policies that lead to exports, we have upside to earnings growth. So all in all, I think it makes sense that the markets have recovered to this point, but the bar for recovering to all-time highs is, of course, higher. But I do think the risk-reward is actually still positive here.
Do you think with the tariff regime as it is, some of the comments made by President Trump over the weekend, that if these are temporary, why would anyone build a plant here?
I think the inflation data recently shows inflation is tracking lower than expected. The Fed has been on hold, and they're saying they're waiting for tariffs. But what's interesting is the ECB has been cutting rates, even though there's tariffs, inflation hitting Europe, or soon to hit Europe. The reason is ECB's inflation measure, the HICP, exclude shelter. If the Fed excluded shelter from its core inflation calculation, it's lower than Europe now, and yet Fed funds is over 225 basis points tighter than Europe. So I can actually sympathize with the argument the Fed should be cutting now, even if we don't know the effects of the tariffs. The two leading indicators for inflation should be commodities, and oil is telling us inflation is weaker. And the labor market, the JOLTS data shows the job market's not that strong, so there's not really a wage pushing inflation.
Tariffs, you still think we get to new highs in 2025 or by 2026?
Yes, I think new highs are possible this year. I mean, one reason is, companies have proven themselves to manage through shocks, and I don't think investors give them enough credit. That happened with COVID. Companies survived. Companies survived a bullwhip effect on the economy. They survived a surge in inflation. They survived the Fed hiking at the fastest rate ever. So I think this tariff shock, while it is shocking, I think earnings will probably outperform expectations. I mean, that'd be one thing. And then I think the things that were leading us down, whether it's Tesla or the Mag 7 or Bitcoin, they've begun to recover. In fact, as you know, Bitcoin's above its April 2nd level. So Bitcoin, I think, is telling us the S&P should recover. Economic data for the next 3 quarters, not only the tariffs, but some of the bullwhip effects and the distortions that have been introduced.
For the next 3 quarters?
Yes.
9 more months of a lack of clarity?
Yes, because I think at the core, I think the stock market's trying to figure out, is this a dip and noisiness, but we exit 2026 in better shape. But of course, if we don't get trade visibility, and so 2026 looks like we're dragging for another 2 or 3 quarters into 2026, then of course the stock market is going to have problems.
Tom Lee believes companies can handle tariff shocks and expects strong earnings, which could help stocks and Bitcoin reach new highs in 2025. He sees Bitcoin as a key hedge when traditional markets struggle. He also notes growing institutional interest in Bitcoin through ETFs, signaling big changes ahead. Lee predicts Bitcoin will grow rapidly as AI and blockchain technologies combine, opening new investment opportunities.
There's big traditional companies doing that, BlackRock, Citadels, etc. And also the ETFs are interesting because now we're bringing the traditional institution money into crypto. Most of the money in the US is institutional money.
Yeah.
The rest of the world is a little bit different, but I think we've seen the effect of that. Bitcoin's going up, and because most of the ETFs are Bitcoin based. So so I think there's a lot of going on. Yeah.
What do you think the total crypto market cap will be by the end of year?
Maybe 5 trillion.
What do you think the price of Bitcoin tops at this cycle?
Again, very difficult question. Somewhere between 500K to $1 million, I think.
Wow.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff happening, sort of like below the noise, right? So I think AI is a big sector. So AI will marry blockchain. AI needs blockchain. AI is a post-blockchain technology, so you will use blockchain natively. And blockchain can use AI a lot as well. And then science, what we call DeSci, I think that still has a lot of long-term positive impact. Fundraising in science is difficult. The problem is science takes a long time, right? So for the meme coin traders, they're not interested in that. They want return next day. But I think science long-term is going to be huge, biotech, etc. So this is very conceivable to use crypto smart contracts to raise money for science projects and deliver them on milestone basis or on a time basis. And incentivize millions of small research labs around the world to be able to do their research. And that combined with big data, AI capabilities, I think we'll see a lot of accelerations in terms of drug discovery, understand human biology.
That's great.
So all of that stuff is going to happen, and is happening. And then he was running for president. I was like, okay, yeah, this would be the best thing. And then he became pro crypto. And then you can see that he's really pro-crypto.
Yeah.
He's not just talking about it.
No, he actually is.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
Right? I was like, yeah, well, obviously this would be a good guy for our industry and also for any sort of people who have a criminal charge, right? Unfairly, I think. So I was watching all of that from prison. And I think we as an industry is very lucky that the current U.S. president is very pro crypto, and he's very smart.
How do you rate the presidency so far?
I think it's great.
Yeah.
Number one is look, this is President Trump understands business. I think a lot of people are worried about the tariffs, etc. But I think that's just negotiation, right? So and it's not a typical geopolitics type of negotiation. But it's a very typical business type of negotiation. In a business environment, you go up super high, you go in super high, and then you go low, you go high, you eventually land at a spot. That's very common in business. In geopolitics, you usually don't see that because it does have large impact on the industries, economies, etc. But it's actually kind of refreshing to see.
Yeah.
And I think President Trump is very much a deals guy. He will make deals.
So you think the trade war with China and Donald Trump could end sooner rather than later?
I think so. China are very good deal guys.
So Xi knows what he's doing.
Yeah. So the Chinese guys are very smart at making deals. Initially, the way that it was communicated, I think the Chinese guys will not like it because Chinese guys in the Asian culture, we care about face.
Yes.
Right. So if you publicly say, "Look, we're going to demand this much," and they're going to say, "Look, we're
they don't like being hustled and bustled."
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So I think there's a bit of a culture difference. Whereas in America, especially with President Trump, is you see his meetings televised through social media in real time, which is really good, really refreshing to see. Right. You don't see that with most other presidents. But he's doing things differently, But I think eventually they all have very good advisors. They all have people who understand the different cultures, etc. So I'm very confident. But at least now they're negotiating.
Yes.
Right. Whereas previously they wasn't talking. They were just softly cutting off each other. At least now they're talking. So I'm actually very optimistic. Yeah.
I love that. What do you think about, speaking of meme coins, what do you feel about Trump's meme coin?
I actually don't know too much about it because I heard so many different stories from different people.
Yeah.
Some say it's really closely associated with them. Some say it's not at all. I actually don't know that much.
There's some association, right? Because they're hosting a dinner in May 22nd with access for the top 20 holders of the meme coin, 25, something like that.
Yeah.
So there's some access, clearly, but
Yeah.
are you a top 25 holder of Trump's meme coin?
No. So
He sees Bitcoin as a key hedge when traditional markets struggle. Tom Lee remains optimistic about the market despite tariff uncertainties, highlighting companies' resilience through past economic shocks and inflation. He believes that Bitcoin, as a risk asset and hedge, could outperform alongside traditional stocks, especially with growing institutional investments through ETF. Lee also emphasizes that the evolving relationship between AI and blockchain could accelerate innovation and long-term growth in the crypto space. As the market navigates trade tensions and economic shifts, Lee encourages investors to stay attentive, noting that while challenges remain, the overall outlook points to opportunity. The blending of emerging technologies and strong corporate interest suggests that both crypto and traditional markets have significant potential moving forward. How do you think tariff policies will impact Bitcoin and the broader crypto market? What role do you believe institutional investors will play in Bitcoin's future growth? Let me know in the comments.